When my boss cut me out, he thought he was making himself look stronger. But what he didn't know was that I held the trust of the investors. The moment I was gone, they started asking questions he couldn't answer. And the $300 million deal began to slip through his fingers. He didn't even bother to meet my eyes when he made the announcement. We were in the boardroom, the city skyline glowing through the glass windows, the air thick with the smell of burnt coffee and expensive cologne. "You're relieved from the project," he said, his voice dripping with the kind of false confidence only arrogance can buy. "I'll handle things from here." My chest tightened, but my face stayed calm. I'd learned long ago that showing emotion in that room was like bleeding in the ocean. It only invited sharks. Around the table, a few heads turned away, a few eyes dropped. No one spoke. It was as if my 15 years of sacrifice, late nights, endless reports, saving this company from collapse more times than I could count, were nothing more than a line item to be deleted. His name was Brent Carter. Young, polished, and utterly unprepared for the weight of responsibility he'd just taken. He wasn't here because of his skills. He was here because of his connections. The CEO's golden boy. A man who thought buzzwords and charm could build bridges stronger than truth. The irony? The deal he was now taking over. The $300 million acquisition that could change everything. Existed only because of me. For months, I had worked like a ghost in the machine. Drafting compliance frameworks, setting up continuity protocols, documenting every possible risk. My fingerprints were on every clause, every page, every handshake. The buyers knew my name. They trusted me. They had no idea who Brent was. But Brent didn't care about trust. He cared about spotlight. And in his eyes, I was in the way. I left the room quietly, binder in hand, my heart pounding but my mind steady. He thought my silence was surrender. What he didn't know was that silence was my strategy. Because I had something he didn't. The truth. Written in ink and contract, buried deep in the deal's clauses. That night, I sat at my small kitchen table, binder open, lamp casting shadows across the pages. Clause 14.3 stared back at me. Transition authority shall remain solely with the designated continuity officer, unless otherwise approved in writing by the buyer. And who was that officer? Me. The only name that mattered in black and white. I hadn't written it for leverage back then. I'd written it to protect the deal from incompetence, to make sure no junior analyst or outsider could be shoved into a role they weren't prepared for. But now? Now it was a time bomb Brent didn't even know existed. The next few days were a theater of arrogance. Brent strutted through the halls with a fresh haircut, spouting words like synergy and innovation, as if they were spells to keep the truth at bay. He smiled too much, spoke too loudly, and believed his own performance. Meanwhile, the buyers were circling closer, asking sharper questions. On Wednesday, I got the first message. An old colleague, still on the inside. He froze when they asked about continuity. Tried to bluff. They weren't buying it. I didn't reply. Not yet. By Friday, the calls started. Not from Brent, of course. His pride wouldn't allow it. But from HR, the COO, even a board member. Just a quick clarification. Do you still have a copy of the compliance memo? We'd love a bit of your insight. They all circled the same truth without admitting it. Brent couldn't do what I had already done. I let them sweat. Because I knew something they didn't. The buyers weren't just buying a company. They were buying certainty. And certainty had my name stamped on every page of the agreement. That weekend, I walked the quiet streets of my neighborhood. Autumn leaves crunching underfoot, mind replaying every detail. I wasn't angry anymore. I was focused. Focused on the moment when their arrogance would collide with reality, when Brent's confidence would evaporate under pressure. And sure enough, it came faster than I expected. On Monday morning, another text. They asked for you by name. Brent tried to dodge. Didn't work. I leaned back in my chair, phone in hand, a slow smile creeping across my face. The $300 million deal was slipping, thread by thread, because they had cut out the one person holding it together, and I wasn't going to rush back to save them. Not yet. Because sometimes, the only way to expose arrogance is to let it collapse under its own weight. And collapse was exactly where Brent's empire was heading. The boardroom felt colder than usual when I walked past it that morning. Through the glass walls, I could see them. The buyers, sharp suits, guarded expressions, the kind of people who measured every word, every pause. And across from them, Brent, sitting too stiff, his smile stretched thin. He was talking, waving, his hands just a little too much, trying to project control. But control isn't something you can fake for long. I wasn't invited, of course. I was no longer needed. But I didn't need to be inside that room to know what was happening. I knew the buyers well enough. I knew how their eyes narrowed when they didn't get a straight answer, how their pens tapped impatiently when numbers didn't add up. And I knew the exact moment their trust was starting to fracture, because it was written in the silence. An hour later, my phone buzzed. A message from Julia, one of the compliance officers. They asked about Clause 14.3. Brent stalled. They know it's tied to you. I closed my eyes, exhaled slowly. It had begun. By lunchtime, the whispers spread across the office. The buyers weren't happy. They'd insisted on a follow-up session, this time with all relevant stakeholders. Everyone knew what that meant. They wanted me. They weren't interested in Brent's rehearsed speeches or the CEO's empty assurances. They wanted the person who had built the framework with her own hands. But no one wanted to admit it. Not yet. That afternoon, the COO stopped by my office. Well, what was left of it? Half my files had already been boxed up, a quiet reminder of how easily they thought they could erase me. He stood awkwardly in the doorway, his tie loosened, a bead of sweat clinging to his temple. "How are you holding up?" he asked. His voice was casual, too casual. I leaned back in my chair. "Depends on why you're really here." He hesitated, then cleared his throat. "The buyers, they've raised some questions. They specifically requested your presence for the next session." I let the silence hang. He shifted uncomfortably. For years I had been invisible to them, a name buried in reports, a worker who kept the engine running without complaint. And now? Now they were tripping over themselves to bring me back. "I thought I wasn't needed," I said finally, my voice even. He winced. "Look, Claire, you know how these things go. Optics, politics. Brent thought he could handle it. But this is bigger than one person's pride. We need you in the room." There it was. "We need you." Words they'd never spoken before. Words I'd waited 15 years to hear. But I didn't let satisfaction show. I just nodded slowly. "I'll think about it." The COO blinked, clearly not expecting resistance. He left with a promise to circle back, his footsteps heavy with the weight of a sinking deal. That night, my phone rang again. This time it was Richard, the CEO himself. The man who had signed off on my removal, who had smiled politely while Brent pushed me aside. His voice was smoother, practiced, but I heard the tension underneath. "Claire, I know there's been some missteps, but we're all on the same team here. Dominion Capital is nervous, and if we don't calm them down, this deal could collapse. I need you to step in, reassure them." I almost laughed. Now he needed me? "Why me?" I asked softly. "You have Brent. He seems confident enough." There was a pause. Long, heavy. Then, "They don't trust him. They trust you." The honesty stung more than the lies ever did. For years, I'd been the backbone no one acknowledged. And now, when the cracks were visible to everyone, they finally admitted the truth. "I'll be there tomorrow," I said at last. Not for Richard, not for Brent, for myself. Because if I was going to walk back into that room, it would be on my terms. The next morning, I dressed carefully. A navy blazer, crisp white shirt, hair tied back. Professional, sharp, untouchable. When I walked into the boardroom, the air shifted. The buyer's eyes lit up with recognition. One of them, a tall man with silver hair, actually smiled. "Ms. Bennett," he said warmly. "Good to see you again." I nodded, calm, controlled, as if I hadn't been erased just a week ago. Across the table, Brent stiffened, his jaw tight, his hands clenching the edge of his notepad. His smile faltered. The session began. The buyers asked their questions, pointed and precise. Brent tried to jump in, but his answers wavered. I waited, patient, until the silence grew heavy, until their eyes turned to me. Then I spoke. Clear, steady, every word grounded in the hours, the nights, the years I had spent building this framework. Compliance clauses, system redundancies, risk protocols, vendor chains. I laid it all out, not with arrogance, but with certainty. And as I spoke, I saw the shift. The buyers leaned forward, pens moving faster, nods of approval passing quietly between them. Trust was returning piece by piece. Brent sank deeper into his chair. His face was pale now, his earlier confidence shredded. He knew what was happening. The spotlight he'd stolen was sliding back where it belonged. After 2 hours, the meeting ended. The buyers shook my hand firmly, thanked me, and promised to move forward, on the condition that I remained in charge of the transition. The words echoed in the room, sealing Brent's fate. The CEO's face was a mask of forced calm, but his eyes burned with regret. Brent didn't even look at me as he gathered his papers, movements stiff, mechanical. When the buyers left, the room fell into a heavy silence. Finally, Richard spoke, his voice low. "Claire, it seems we miscalculated." I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The truth was written all over their faces. They had gambled on arrogance, and arrogance had lost. That evening, as I walked out of the building, the city lights blazing around me, I felt a strange calm. For years I had been invisible, underestimated, replaceable in their eyes. But today they saw me. Today, they needed me more than ever. And I wasn't done yet, because saving the deal was only the beginning. The real reckoning was still to come. The silence after that meeting lingered like smoke. Everyone had left, yet the weight of the day clung to me. I knew this wasn't victory, not yet. What I had done was stop the collapse, hold the walls together just before they crumbled. But inside those walls, there were cracks no one else wanted to see. Brent did. Or maybe he just felt them. Because later that evening, as I packed my bag, I heard the sharp, hurried echo of his footsteps. He stormed into my office, his face flushed red with fury. "You think you won today?" he hissed, slamming the door behind him. "You embarrassed me in front of the buyers. You undermined me." I didn't flinch. "I didn't undermine you, Brent. I told the truth. Something you've been trying to bury for months." His jaw tightened, a vein throbbing near his temple. "You don't understand. You're playing with fire. If the buyers dig deeper, if they start asking about the numbers..." He stopped himself, realizing too late that he'd said too much. And there it was. Confirmation. The fraud I had suspected wasn't just whispers or rumors. It was real. Brent had been covering it up, twisting the numbers, feeding lies to the board. And now, with me back in the picture, his empire was trembling. I leaned forward, my voice calm but sharp. "If there's something they shouldn't see, that's on you. Not me." His glare hardened. For a moment I thought he might lunge across the desk, but instead, he straightened, adjusted his tie, and forced a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Careful, Claire. People who go digging sometimes find themselves buried." He left without another word, but his warning hung in the air like a curse. The next day I noticed small things. My emails loading slower, certain files missing from the shared drive. A compliance folder I knew I had bookmarked was suddenly locked. It wasn't a glitch. Brent was moving against me, tightening his grip on the system, but he underestimated me. Again, I'd kept copies. Quietly, methodically, over the years, I'd saved key documents, every audit, every discrepancy that didn't add up. At the time, I thought it was just habit, a safety net in case someone questioned my work. But now it was my weapon. That night, I spread the files across my dining table. Contracts, invoices, expense sheets, all laced with Brent's fingerprints. The numbers didn't just whisper fraud. They screamed it. Inflated vendor costs, phantom services billed, money siphoned through shell companies. Piece by piece, I built the story he'd tried so hard to erase, and as I worked, one thought burned brighter than the rest. This isn't just about me anymore. It's about every person who gave their time, their sweat, their loyalty to this company, only to be betrayed by someone like him. By the time the next buyer meeting came, I was ready. They greeted me with warm smiles again, pens poised, questions lined up. Brent tried to lead, but his voice cracked with every answer. His usual charm had curdled into desperation. And when the buyers turned to me, I gave them clarity, numbers that matched, systems that made sense, proof that Dominion Capital wasn't buying into a sinking ship. But then came the moment I'd been waiting for. "Ms. Bennett," one of the buyers asked, "we've noticed certain irregularities in last quarter's financials. Can you clarify?" The room fell silent. Brent stiffened, his hand frozen mid-note. His eyes shot toward me wide with panic. He expected me to cover for him, to smooth it over like I always had. But not this time. I opened the folder in front of me, the one I had prepared with surgical precision. "Yes," I said calmly, "I can clarify. In fact, I think it's time you saw what's really happening." I slid the documents across the table. The buyers leaned in, scanning the pages. Their brows furrowed, pens scribbled, eyes flicked from paper to Brent and back again. "Are you saying," one began carefully, "that these numbers have been manipulated?" Brent shot up from his chair. "This is outrageous. She's lying. She's been bitter ever since." "Sit down, Brent." The CEO's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. It was the first time Richard had raised his voice in months, his gaze locked on me now, sharp, questioning. "Claire, how certain are you of this?" "Certain enough to stake my career on it," I said firmly. The buyers exchanged looks, whispers passing between them. The silver-haired man tapped the papers with his pen. "If this is true, then Dominion Capital has decisions to make." Brent sputtered, his face red, his composure unraveling. "She's setting me up. She's twisting things." But no one was listening to him anymore. That evening, my phone buzzed with a message from Julia again. "Word is out. They've opened an internal investigation. Brent's in trouble." I stared at the screen, the words blurring for a moment as relief washed over me. For the first time, the weight I'd carried alone was being lifted. The truth was no longer mine to guard. It was out in the open, unstoppable. But I also knew this was far from over. Brent wasn't the kind of man to go down quietly. And if he was desperate before, now he was cornered. And cornered men can be dangerous. That night, as rain streaked down my windows, I sat at my desk and opened my laptop. There were more files, more evidence, more truth waiting to be revealed. Brent thought he could frame me, bury me, erase me, but he forgot one thing: I don't break. I fight. And this fight was only just beginning. The storm had begun. The morning after the buyers' meeting, Dominion Capital was buzzing with whispers. Brent's name carried a new weight now, not authority, but suspicion. People exchanged glances in the hallways, their conversations dropping to hushed tones the second he walked by. I kept my head down, but inside, I knew the battle had only escalated. By mid-afternoon, Richard, the CEO, called for an emergency board meeting. Brent tried to appear calm as he walked into the glass-walled conference room, but the sweat along his collar betrayed him. I followed quietly, clutching my files like a shield. The boardroom felt heavier than usual. The buyers had already filed their concerns. Now, the board wanted answers. "Brent," Richard began, his voice cold. "There are allegations of financial manipulation under your leadership. Can you explain this?" Brent forced a laugh, thin and unconvincing. "Allegations? From who? From her?" He jabbed a finger toward me. "She's been plotting against me since the day she came back. She's twisting numbers, poisoning the board against me." "Enough," Richard snapped. His eyes cut toward me. "Claire, show us what you have." The room fell into silence. My hands didn't tremble as I opened the binder and laid out the evidence. Falsified invoices, inflated vendor contracts, payments to companies that didn't exist. Each page was a nail in Brent's coffin. One by one, the board members leaned in, scanning the papers, their faces darkening with each revelation. "This isn't a mistake," one said grimly. It's deliberate, another added. Brent's mask cracked. His voice rose, panicked now. She's lying! She's desperate for revenge! You can't trust her, Brent. Richard's tone was final. We've verified these documents. The numbers don't lie. Brent's face drained of color. For once, he had no slick words, no silver tongue to save him. His empire of lies was collapsing in real time, and he could only watch. Finally, Richard spoke the words everyone had been waiting for. You're suspended effective immediately, pending investigation. Security will escort you out. The silence that followed was suffocating. Brent's chair screeched as he stood, his fists clenched, his eyes burning into me with venom. This isn't over, he spat. You'll regret this. But the guards were already at his side. And just like that, the man who thought he could bury me was the one being walked out in shame. In the weeks that followed, the truth spread like wildfire. The buyers pulled back, but not from us, from him. Dominion Capital launched a full-scale investigation, uncovering years of corruption Brent had buried under charm and intimidation. Employees who once feared him began to speak out. Stories of his manipulations, his bullying, his backroom deals, all of it surfaced. The empire he had built on deceit turned to dust, just as I knew it would. And through it all, I stood stronger than ever. Not because I wanted revenge, but because the truth mattered. One evening, Julia found me in the break room. You did it, she said softly, her eyes shining. You brought him down. I shook my head. No, the truth did. I just refused to stay silent, she smiled. That's what makes you different, Claire. Most people would have given up, but you fought back. Her words stayed with me long after she left, because she was right. This fight wasn't just about me. It was about every person who has ever been silenced, blamed, or broken by someone in power. And if my story could inspire even one person to stand up, then everything I endured was worth it. Months later, Dominion Capital was no longer a house of lies. With new leadership, transparency, and accountability, it began to rebuild, not on deceit, but on trust. And every time I walked through those glass doors, I remembered the moment Brent tried to frame me. He thought I would break, but instead, I rose. If you've been with me through this journey, thank you for reading. Stories like these remind us that lies can never bury the truth forever. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel for more powerful stories of courage, betrayal, and resilience. Your support keeps these stories alive.